like that's not enough, we could ask Steve to come back and do another hour at another meeting.
Is one of your fellows an expert in presenting that?
Right.
No, we want to see you do it.
Okay.
We could share.
We can share.
I share.
I
Yeah.
presented it.
We have a
several
fun
people
skin to
present
do
it.
that helps.
I'll send you our materials.
Okay.
You'll like our skin.
Super, thank you.
Just a real quick reminder also that we kind of discussed it in detail last time, and we all agreed not to go down the road to have the 400-500-page version, but a more condensed. You can always go there later. You need to.
And it gets very complex
Yes.
and detailed, and there's a lot of formalities, you know, if you really get into Robert's rules. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
I'd like to say too, that I think the way, my experience with the academic senate, since it's been using it, it's kind of a guideline rather than a hard and fast rule. Because otherwise, you could spend the whole meeting on the Robert's rules and what to do and look it up in his book, and never get anything done in the meeting. I don't think Robert's rules is ever intended to be followed to the letter, even though whoever wrote it was very
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement, and okay for March 19th, to have about an hour. Robert's rules, if we finish before then, or if we have more questions, we can discuss it and need additional training after an hour. Will that work for everybody? Yeah, is that good? Okay, super.
I can comment quickly on 1A and B if you'd
on
like.
A and B, yes, please.
Okay. 1A, I apologize. Things have been busy, and I haven't taken the steps to figure out exactly what the flaw is in our posting process. But if it hasn't been fixed yet, and I suspect that it probably hasn't, we will get on it, because when the procedures are approved by the chancellor, they should be immediately posted. There's really no reason for them not to be posted within 24 hours of the chancellor acting. So we'll get that right.
So there are some procedures, administrative procedures in particular, that have been in place for some time that I don't see there. One has to do with the collegial consultation for the academic senate and for some other things. And so it's worked really hard to get those administrative procedures in place, and now they're not posted anywhere. So I can give you my little
That'd be great.
my little list of the numbers that I know that are missing.
Terrific.
And
Thank
I
you
know
very
you
much.
can find all of these on the academic senate website, but they're not anywhere else.
Very good.
And I'm sending you a reminder email in case you missed that. Use that little piece of paper.
Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you, Steve.
And B, I think, was more sort of internal to the group, in terms of how we were going to keep track of all the comments that were made in the meeting. That's what we're talking about on B. And perhaps we were talking about taking more detailed minutes. I'm not sure how we were going to do that. I know one thing we talked about was it wasn't clear when something was just a comment that someone was making, a thought about a policy, as opposed to the consensus of the group that there should be a change to the policy. And last time we talked about when that comes up, if the group wants there actually to be a change to the policy, there should be, if not a vote, at least a statement of some sort by the group that we want it changed, as opposed to sometimes people say, well, how about this? And nobody else really thinks it's important, so that doesn't really move forward. So I think that was part of what we talked about under B.
I have a question, maybe it's more comment. If we want to keep track of all the things that are said here, why don't we use the small Zoom recorders and record the meetings and post them on the site as an audio recording? If we just send all of us, and then nobody has to worry that they missed an important comment, that people can go in and check for themselves. Just a thought, I know that we have Zoom recorded all the time.
Sorry, it's actually recorded. If you want me to post everything started from the beginning, I would gladly do it. I've been recording it ever since from the
It
beginning.
just seems like,
Yeah.
that's what we do for the Senate meetings, and if someone
Thank
has
you,
a question,
Francine.
They can go here and actually what was said, instead of having he said, she said, and people arguing about what was said, you can hear for yourself. And then it saves some time in this. All the Senate meetings are recorded, so there's no reason we can't do this.
But that only solves one part of it, because that doesn't answer whether an edit or a comment is going forward and affecting a change to the document.
So we need formal motion.
We need
Right.
formal motions and we need
Record.
a place where people can hear for themselves the discussion.
Yes, sir.
I think that I was saying, the formal motions to make those edits, to see if the edits that are suggested are carried on.
Yeah, right.
Very good, super. Okay, thank you, Steve. All right, next is a budget update, so I'm gonna invite Ron up. A, B, and C, Ron, 15 minutes.
15 for all three?
You sure you need more?
I'm gonna make a motion now to extend time.
Your email.
That's getting really tight. Karen, you wanna do that now?
Yes, okay, I think we should have at least 25 minutes for this.
25 minutes. So moved. Yes.
Okay. Budget update, A, B, and C. So there's three documents. I can get set up here real quick. That I wanted to cover, and if I could do this in terms of documents, just cover the calendar first. At our last meeting, we discussed the calendar. It was on our agenda. We made changes to it based upon adding governing board versus special trustee. But it just, everything we're discussing, everything we're discussing subsequent to this is in context of following this calendar that is within our administrative procedure on budget development, but is really geared towards keeping us, the collective we, on track and timeline for budget development, integration of that budget development with program reviews and our planning processes, and meeting the certain Title V deadlines and requirements in terms of when the tentative budget must be adopted and also the final budget must be adopted. So that's the easiest piece in terms of my, I'm sorry, how many minutes did you? Oh, okay. So now jumping to the budget update, as many of you may be aware, the budget process in itself, both for us but also the state, really kicks off with the release of the governor's budget, which happens in early part of January. And it begins the budget discussion. And that's, I can't stress that enough, but I think most folks understand that. Because if you go back and look at historically what the governor has put forward as his budget proposal in January, and compare that with what is actually signed more recently at the end of June, but not too long ago, sometimes in October and September, there were a wide variety of changes. But again, it underscores the point that it's the beginning point of the budget development, both in terms of the state, but also its impacts developing our budget. So the governor in early January released his budget proposal, and it was generally positive for community colleges. And it's the first time that we've had generally positive news in quite some time. The major provisions I'll cover here in a moment, but then in the subsequent document, in the last document, really get into the discussion of how these may impact us if the governor were to sign a budget today that reflected these items, what it would mean to our operational budget, what it would mean to our stability funding, which was a question I received earlier today, and also what it may mean to really our enrollment management plan and everything else that goes through the institution. Really, that is the heart and blood of us as City College. So the first piece is the first bullet point, and I won't go into this at nauseum, but instead just give you the highlights of each bullet point, which the highlights are the items in bold. So for example, here's the bullet point, which is really a summary of what was contained in the governor's proposal. And then the bold is really the Reader's Digest version and how it may impact us, and I'll get into that more in a little So, as you might expect, the governor is continuing his support of the Triple SP, the Student Success Initiative, the student equity funding, and everything that's involved with that. So the budget provides, as a system, all 72 districts in the state. He's proposing to augment additional funds, the funding for Triple SP to the tune of about $200 million. And this includes $100 million for orientation, assessment, placement counseling, and other educational planning services that we provide. Now, at a general level, 15,000-foot level, the Triple SP, the funding and how that money is allocated to community colleges, it's much more difficult than Triple SP's predecessor, which was matriculation. The Triple SP is allocated to the districts based upon approximately half of it is based upon FTES, and then the remaining half is based upon MIS data, or data we transmit to the state on a periodic basis in terms of how many times we've did orientation to a student or a group of students, and assessment and the counseling and everything else involved in that. And seeing some folks in here, they're probably the experts here at it, so they can probably speak to it more intelligently than I. But all to say is that the $200 million is a system-wide allocation. Right now, based upon existing data that we have, that $200 million may translate into as much as about $4.4 million in augmentation to our programs. And really, again, the criteria and the restrictions in the use of those funds are the Triple SP program and equity in itself. So it's not unrestricted general fund dollars, but restricted for all intents and purposes.
Would you elaborate more
Okay.
on this? I'm confused. So what the difference between before and now?
Well, matriculation.
The restrictions? Yes.
Well, the previous program on before the Student Success Initiative was matriculation. Through the Student Success Initiative and the approval of that, I guess 2 years ago now?
2012.
So yeah, about almost 3 years ago, really transitioned it from the matriculation program to this Triple SP program. And again, the focus on it predominantly is on those areas that, in terms of student assessment, orientation, placement counseling, and also a piece of that is the equity plan, right? If I could, Margaret.
Okay, well, I think that equity funding is separate, and SSSP, Student Success and Services Programs, focuses on, with an equity piece, which is separate funding, but the SSP focuses on those core services that Ron was just saying, so, which is assessment, counseling, and orientation.
So if I understand Rusha's question correctly, is really what is the difference between the former matriculation and this new categorical that we have?
So before we were funded solely based on headcount, and now we're based on a combination of headcount and the actual services that we provide. So there's a kind of a complex formula where the state has a certain amount allocated for orientation, let's say. So let's say there's $10 million for orientation. So then everybody sends in their data and says, this is how many orientations we supply all over the state, and then we get that percentage of that funding because we provide about 7,000 orientations, no, 10,000 orientations a year. So then we get that percentage of that 10 million based on how many orientations are provided throughout the state.
And
Assuming that we
it's
can
individual
report it.
contacts, right? It's contacts with students.
For orientation or maybe an online orientation.
Right.
Yeah.
But Margaret, isn't it also, the difference is that, like you said, my understanding and is that, like what the difference between the old and the new is that, you said the first one was based on head count, but now, head count only, but now the money is gonna be based on that each student has to go through these steps. So we'll only get a piece of the money if they only do one of the steps. So in order for us to get the full money, they have to do the complete process.
Exactly.
So that's the part that we really have to pay attention to, and that's what's affecting you know, like IT and MIS and how to get that data out of Banner and all that, so like it's complicated.
So, you know, really, I'm sorry, Mike?
I can add a little bit more
Yeah,
too.
please.
The SSSP is more restricted, meaning that they have certain categories that we must meet to be able to receive the money each year. With matriculation, we were able to do a variety of other things within the institution, but these fundings are specific, and it's about taking students through processes that we hope will help them be prepared to start the first day of school. And how many we get through that process, all three of those processes will identify how many students, how much money that we will receive. The other piece of it is too that's important. It was just there, and it disappeared. Okay, but I guess those are the major pieces. A very restricted fund that we must take students through all three of those processes to be able to receive the funding. Well, the other piece was it's for first-time students and follow-up. That's the other major important piece.
And that wasn't the case with matriculation?
And that was not the
Right.
case with matriculation.
Right. So, going to the second bullet point, unless there's any other questions on triple SP. The governor put in a line item for approximately $125 million of general fund Prop 98 dollars. That the spirit and the intent behind it is to assist districts, the 72 districts, manage and respond to certain cost increases related to, for example, like PERS and STIRS, increases, employment increases as we go forward. And the example of that is just STIRS, using that as an example. STIRS released their report in terms of their actuarial report, kind of like what we have to do with OPEB. And their unfunded liability was in excess of $70 billion. So understanding the need to fund those pension obligations and those pension benefits, the STIRS board and the governor approved really a gradual, and I'm using that term loosely, increase in the employer's contribution to ultimately fully fund or bridge that $70 billion gap over a period of years. So the more recent example of that is prior to this year, just last fiscal year, our employer contribution for employees in STIRS was 8.25%. This plan that's been implemented this fiscal year, that increase went from 8.25 to 8.88%. Next year, it's going higher, in excess of 10%. So understanding the implications of that across all districts in the state, the spirit and intent was that this money, this allocation, this part of Prop 98, would be allocated and used to assist districts in really managing those operational cost increases without any knee-jerk or minimizing knee-jerk reactions, budgetary reactions to that. So going down, growth money, the governor has proposed to put about $107 million in growth money on the table. It's approximately a 2% growth funded rate across the state, across the system. For us right now, we're in stability funding. I would love for us to be in growth. I think that would be a laudable goal. But right now with stability, we'll talk more about that later, it's probably not realistic. Cost of living adjustment. The budget, his proposal provides approximately $92.4 million in COLA. 1.58% is what it translates out to. For us, that's approximately $2.2 million for our unrestricted general fund. Right now, there's a question about how broadly that COLA percentage is applied, meaning in more recent years, after the Great Recession, more recent years, there's been COLA allocated, but it's only been provided to the unrestricted general fund in certain categorical programs, not necessarily all categorical programs. So as we get more information in terms of the nuts and bolts behind the governor's proposal, we'll better understand whether or not that's across the board or to certain categorical programs in the unrestricted general fund or whatnot. But it's just something to keep our eyes The adult educational block grant, the governor is continuing that agenda. Initially put it up, I think, about a year or two ago in terms of going in this direction. Putting about $500 million up for the implementation. Right now, there isn't much clear direction on how that money would be allocated. In general, what the governor is proposing is K-12s and community college districts getting together and forming like regional groups, if you will. They call it joint powers authorities, or JPAs, really to work out the minutia and the mechanics behind, you know, the K-12 and the community college interaction on this, and then really that would drive the funding. So right now, there isn't necessarily any clear guidance on how this money is going to be rolled out, because there's some other legwork that has to occur, such as formation of those regional joint JPAs. Apprenticeship programs. Budget provides $29.1 million in augmentation for apprenticeship programs. Right now, based upon our 320 and what our apprenticeship is generating in terms of contact hours FPS, it's approximately about $680,000. CTE programs provides augmentation of $48 million in one-time money to support CTE endeavors and programs. Much of that right now, it's if the governor follows the more recent pattern, that's going to be allocated through like a grant mechanism. Districts, colleges really completing grant proposals, submission for consideration, and if we're awarded, we would get some of this money that has been put out there. Enhanced non-credit. This is huge for us, as you can imagine. What this originally started in the budget, in the current year budget, which the governor signed 7 months ago. In it included language that the governor intention to fund or increase the funding for our CDCP FTES, our enhanced non-credit FTES. Prior to this funding, our enhanced non-credit was funded about 2/3 the rate of our credit FTES. So really what it's doing is bringing up the funding, the per FTES funding, from that 2/3 level up to 100%. Right now, for us, it's approximately a little in excess of 7,000, 7,500 FTES. So it's significant for us. It's approximately $9.9 million augmentation for us in our unrestricted general fund. Mandated block grant payments provides $353 million in block grants. Mandates were, I'm not sure how many people know what mandated costs are. Basically, they were obligations that through some form in the past that the state put additional responsibilities or pushed more mandated services to colleges. And in exchange for that, because we at the time weren't necessarily getting any funding for more and more of those responsibilities, they did these mandated cost programs that essentially we quantified the additional work it took to perform these mandated services, and we'd get reimbursed in theory. It's rarely been fully funded, and so we have a large receivable on our books. The state owes us for our mandated programs, but there really hasn't been any firm thought that the state was going to fund that. But you know, the governor is putting some money on there to really kind of increase this block grant that is in theory supposed to pay us for those years of receivables on our books. For us, it's approximately 6.5, or projected to be about 6.5 in one-time funding for us. The last component that's, I think, pertinent to us and how we operate is complete elimination of deferrals, and really the governor following through on his desire to, eliminate that wall of debt that the state had. And really, for those that may not be familiar with deferrals, they're IOUs. So rather than the state paying us in January, because the state didn't have the cash or the budget at the time, they basically give us a deferral and said, rather than paying you in January for your FTES, your student, your instruction, we'll pay you perhaps 6 months later in July in the next fiscal year. So as a mechanism for the state to kind of shift their liabilities, their financial obligations around to meet their issues with the Great Recession and other items. So that is a general overview of the major provisions within the governor's proposals and how they may affect us. Again, it's a starting point, and chances are, like every other year, what we see at the next milestone in the state's budget development process, which is the May revise. The governor comes back and updates his proposal based upon more recent information as it gets closer to the end of the fiscal year, nearing the new fiscal year. The May revise will hopefully give us better data, more concrete data for which we can adjust our budget and have some assurance on what's going to happen when the governor signs the budget in June. More recently, we've had on-time budgets. In the past, that was a concern, but not necessarily more recently. So now, transitioning the discussion to the budget assumptions, or the primary budget assumptions that we take away from that summary of the governor's proposal. And adding to that some of the other things, some of the other components that's in the plan for the 8-year plan for stability and some of the other components of it, we flesh out these principles upon which then we build the framework of our unrestricted general fund budget primarily. That's what this is geared towards as we continue in the process. And again, the process being outlined in that calendar, that first document that we looked at. Any questions? Please.
I'm going back a little bit to a previous one. So, if the state is able to basically pay us with an IOU, does it mean that we have to do pretty much what we do also at the beginning of the fiscal year, that to pay salary, we would have to go borrow money?
Yes, that's what it meant. And
That costs us
this
money.
last year we didn't have to borrow money because our financial statements, our financial position has improved. In 2009, 10, and 10, 11, we did have to go out there, and not only did we sell bonds or notes, short-term notes on Wall Street, but we also went to the Treasurer Controller's office to seek a line of credit. You know, at the high point, the state was giving us as a system 72 districts in excess of, I think it was a little in excess of $960 million in these IOUs. For us, that translated to a little in excess of approximately $35 million in money that the state owed us, but they couldn't pay us because of this, so we had to go out and borrow.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
What did the other districts around the state do in that circumstance?
They did exactly what we did. A lot of them went and either did one or a combination of the both of the things that we did. That being going out and issuing tax and revenue anticipation notes, and or going to their county treasurer, and there's I think it's a constitutional provision, but there's a provision for us to borrow up to 85% of our anticipated property tax receipts. So that's the other mechanism that we use too. So at our high point, you know, even though our deferrals from the state was about $35 million, you know, at one point in time between those two, we were borrowing or had the ability to borrow in excess of $90 million.
I'm a little confused as to why it seems like maybe the time in which the credit agency or someone was saying that we were financially in this huge, unusual, like no one else in the whole entire state crisis, and yet what you're saying is, what is it wrong?
We were. They weren't necessarily doing it to the same extent as we were, but they were doing the same.
I just find it kind of interesting. I didn't know the other districts were doing that.
Yeah, majority of them did the combination of the two. there were some districts that didn't have to because they had larger fund balances or reserves. But that doesn't necessarily equate, that does not equate to cash in the bank anyway. So,
That's just something that I'm disappointed, I guess, to hear that we are being held to a different standard in that regard by the ACCJC than what it sounds like most districts in the state in that one area. There's other areas I realize, but I recall hearing a lot of negative things about all the borrowing that we were doing. And I wasn't aware of what it said. And now I'm hearing
oh no, no, there were others that were issuing trans and borrowing from the county.
and we're a huge district, so we would be borrowing much more.
Yeah.
Juan, what does $90 million represent in terms of the percentage of our total?
Budget at the time, our unrestricted general fund budget at the time we were borrowing 90 was a little in excess of 200 million, about 210 million. So 45, there's a little in excess of 40%. So you know, it was a significant percentage, you know, but I think it's Francine too.
That the state owed us?
Is the money? Well, the state owed us 35 million, but because of local issues, we had to borrow more than that.
I think that's the problem we have, that other districts didn't have. Even though the state only owed us 35 million, we borrowed 90. So we had other fiscal challenges that some other districts, even though they were using trans and they were using other mechanisms, i.e. the county, to keep them afloat. Payroll, to pay their obligations. We were well in excess of what the state owed us. I think that's
So we borrowed all that, or we could, that would be the other question, we had a $90 million credit.
We borrowed, at the time there was an excess of 90, we borrowed, in terms of the trans, we drew down all of the trans, which was 42 million, and then in addition to that, we dipped into some districts like LA, for example, they actually did interfund borrowing within their own funds, and the only fund really that they had to that size was the bond fund. So because of that concern, I think it was the Attorney General basically came out and issued a legal opinion, or perhaps it was basically came out and said, you can't doing that because you're taking away interest on that money that ultimately the taxpayers are owed because it would have gone to further construction projects. So a lot of districts actually did that, but as soon as that opinion came out, those other resources like that basically dried up.
We did not borrow.
We did.
We did?
We did.
Then we had to not.
Right. Then we had to not, yes.
Did all those, the whole 90 million get paid back?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we didn't go into default.
In the
We paid all.
in the same fiscal year?
Yes. Yeah, we didn't default. Yeah, if we had not, it would have been a larger newspaper writing. So going to the assumptions, balanced budget, just general assumptions, balanced budget, contingency for reserve, again, following, this is 15-16, so this is the current year budget. 15-16. Balance, how am I doing on time? I'm sorry. Am I getting the gong?
No, but James did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. James.
I was just curious, I looked at all the posted. What's the total roll up to for 2015-16 with these assumptions last year?
Well, jumping into the chase.
Okay,
You're
then
beating
I'll
me
wait
to
if
it.
you're gonna get.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, reserve, I'm just gonna go over the highlights. The board, the BDR, Board Designated Reserve, may recall in the 8-year plan that the elected governing board approved, there was amounts set aside each year to go in a Board Designated Reserve. For this year, the current year, in 14-15, it's $3 million. You'll see that in our budget book online, and you may recall from the meetings that we had. For next year, it drops down from 3 down to 1.2 million. So again, following that plan that was approved, the Board Designated Reserve, the BDR, drops down to $1.2 million. Program review to be used. General apportionment deficit factor of 1%, which is about the 5-year average. For those that may not be familiar with the deficit factor, basically that's money that the state has the ability to withhold, take off the top from our allocation, as every other district in the state, to offset certain revenue shortfalls that we may encounter, again, as a system, as 72 districts. The biggest example of this is if the state projects that they're going to get, or we as a system are going to get $1 billion, and I'm using a low number, in property tax revenue, and we only collect $900 million. Basically what the state does is share the pain equally across all 72 districts, and this is the mechanism how they do that. The 5-year average in terms of our deficit factors more recently has been about 1%. So using that as data and tangible evidence from what prior years are, that's what we've proposed or put in here for a deficit factor. Continued stability funding. We talked about this, a little bit about this last week in the Academic Senate, very briefly and quickly. But we are, 15-16 is year 2 of our extended stability funding under SB 860. In the current year, 14-15, we're at 100% stability, and that stability is based upon FTES we served in fiscal year 12-13, which was approximately 33, less than 33,000 FTES. So in the current year, we're being funded at 33,000 FTES, even though we're serving significantly less than that, maybe 26, 27,000, at least in terms of projected over the entire year. Now, next year, what this means, what this language means, is in SB 860, unless that enrollment comes back, unless the FTES comes back, our base funded FTES drops down by 5%. It's a 5% step down. So the dollar magnitude for that, for us, would be about $7.8 million. So again, the way the state funds us, it's based upon funded FTES. And so how, kind of going to one of Karen's email questions that I appreciate you emailing me ahead of time, is that the way the state implements this is basically they equate that $7.8 million in terms of FTES in our funded base, our ongoing funded base FTES drops down by approximately what we're projecting, about 1,200 FTES. And that's kind of a combination of credit, enhanced non-credit principle. Our regular non-credit programs are approximately where they were at in 12-13. They're a little down, but not as much as the enhanced non-credit, and really the area that we're down the most is on the credit side. So probably most of that 1,200, approximately 22, is probably going to be in the area of the credit programs, the funded credit FTES. Again, that doesn't necessarily immediately equate to sections or anything else, because what that then does is informs the enrollment management plan and the offering of sections, the building of the schedule of classes, ultimately to get to that funded FTES level. And it's a lot, but ultimately it's driven based upon the funded FTES. So going more bluntly, this doesn't equate right now to anything in terms of reductions, because what it informs is our target FTES, which then informs and drives our schedule of classes and how we're going to get there. That is the biggest integration of funding and budgeting that we have as community colleges. So I hope when accreditation, and we're writing our report, we'll keep that in mind, because the greatest link that we can provide in terms of our planning, our integrated planning, is really with our classes and our scheduled classes in that planning. enrollment management budget. Mary. I think I tried to answer Karen your number one question. Okay. What part am I missing?
So I hear you say that this informs our part of FTES, which informs our enrollment management plan. Right. So now as a department chair, I've already turned in the schedule of what we're going to be offering in the fall, and no one said, here's our enrollment management plan. I haven't seen our enrollment management plan. So I couldn't use our enrollment management plan to inform what I put in for what classes we're offering in the fall. It turns out being in some ways more confusing. I mean, so yes, I see now that you've got that workload reduction listed under revenue assumptions of our getting less in revenue. It doesn't clarify to me. Are you saying we're also going to expend less, so it's not under expenditure assumptions, that in order to match the 7.82 million less in funding, we're going to spend 7.82 less?
No, not necessarily, and that goes to James's question of, if I could summarize your question as I understood it, is, Ron, I get this revenue assumptions, increase, decrease in revenue, I get the expenditure assumptions, increases in expenditures, decrease in expenditures. What is the net amount, really? And the net amount is that we're actually going to have, because of the enhanced non-credit funding increase, the enhanced non-credit funding increase for us is in excess of $9 million.
Unless we lose a lot of non-credit sections.
Well, yes and no, because we're still on stability funding at 95% for enhanced non-credit for fiscal year 15-16. So again, looking at that step down, we may have, compared to that high watermark year of 12-13, say, just to take a big example, 9,000 enhanced non-credit FTES. Right now, we may be serving, say, hypothetically 7,000, but that 5% reduction will be 95% of 9,000 FTES. So we still may be serving, less than what we're funded for, but that's the benefit of that stability funding. And even with that 5% drop down, the enhanced non-credit piece to us is an augmentation in our unrestricted general fund in excess of $9 million. So that fills what would have been a $7.8 million workload reduction, right?
So I guess my next question about
We're
that
at
is,
35 minutes, extension for 10 minutes.
I move that we extend, this is a very important conversation for like, what, 10 minutes?
Can we do it in 10 minutes? Second, any objection?
Can I just follow up by saying then, so my question about the enrollment management plan is probably not, your department to share the enrollment management plan. Who's responsible for getting the enrollment management plan across all the schools?
Well,
developing the enrollment management plan.
Well,
I know we have an enrollment management committee, but I haven't seen any results.
Yeah, they've had meetings. I've been the one. Actually, I had to leave here last time to go there. But really, again, going back to that administrative procedure 8.01, budget development, is really, it starts with the Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, the Vice Chancellor of Student Development, and the Vice Chancellor of Finance and Budget. Again, looking at these assumptions, going, okay, ultimately at the highest level, what is going to be our funded FTES? And then once that is calculated, once that is determined, then it goes to really academic affairs and student development, mainly academic affairs, to really develop the schedule of classes, to build a schedule to get us to that FTES level that is funded by the state. And again, from my perspective, I always advocate or encourage us getting to about 500 or 1,000 FTES above what the state's going to fund us, so that we don't lose or leave any money on the table should we fall a little short of that.
I don't know if I heard you correctly, but are we saying that we're building the enrollment plan based on funding at the stability rate, so that the course schedules are based on what we would have if we had 95% of 2012-13, right?
Correct.
But we're still getting a lot fewer enrollment now, and then there's class cancellations as a consequence of that. What's the build around in that? Or is that not an answer? That's not a question.
You know, really, it's following, you know, again, I'm not sure this directly answers it, but just following and, you know, looking at and managing your schedule of passage and enrollment. I mean, that's, you know, better question to be answered for the academic affairs side of the house in terms of, you know, the overall enrollment management, course management, low enrollment classes, looking at them, are they going to meet, are they not going to meet, are they gateway classes or classes to continue in a program? You know, there's a lot of questions, and I think Vice Chancellor Lamb, I think pretty well described it at the last board meeting, is that it's complicated. And to be honest with you, I probably couldn't do it justice. So I would have to defer really to her.
But essentially you are saying that we are intentionally building towards that 95% of enrollment,
That's what I'm saying.
with an understanding that there will be much lower enrollment.
That is what I'm saying. Okay, so cost of living adjustment, going number, you know, just kind of jumping some of these in the interest of time, if I could. Looking at increase number 8, jumping down to number 8. We already covered cost of living, the COLA. Number 8, 9.9 million in the CDCP funding. But again, because of what we're talking about right now, if the enrollment doesn't get up back to that 95% level, much of this funding is one time. And I can't underscore that enough too, is that if at the end of fiscal year 15-16, with this with the stability structure, if the enrollment doesn't come back to a 90% level, we have another 5% drop down. And the CDCP, you can only increase the CDCP funding rate once to get it to match credit. So unless the enrollment comes back, basically this is one-time funding, and we'll be in a situation this time next year about talking about a real dollar reduction to the unrestricted general fund, as opposed to a reduction but an increase to offset that. Okay. Augmentation, let's see, augmentation received in recognition increased operational expenses. Again, number 9, much of, like, for example, the COLA, number 9, is on the previous sheet on the summary that we talked about in the bold. Number 10 is the estimate of what the base funding FTES are going to be. And again, right now we're on 100% stability funding. A 95% drop down would be about 30,990, approximately 21,484 in credit, 2,660 in non-credit, and 6,845 in the enhanced non-credit. That would be roughly the funded drop down. Now, these may change slightly, but again, these are targets based upon January data, but as we get near, may revise, as we get near towards the end of the fiscal year and the beginning of the next fiscal year, we'll be firming up these numbers through conversations with the State Chancellor's Office and based upon data from LAO and where we're at. But again, projections right now. Partial tax revenue, continue to measure a partial tax revenue of 15.5 or 15.2 million. Continued sales tax increase of 16 million. And Prop 30 state funding continued at 23.9 million. Not that it's relevant for fiscal year 14-15, but eventually we need to keep our eyes, and this is on another agenda item in the future. But again, looking at over the next 8 years, is that the 2 mechanisms that is funding Prop 30, the sales tax increase and the high wage earner increase, are sunsetting. Sunsetting in 17, and then the subsequent year, the following year in 18. Right now, there's some momentum for the state perhaps to put on a ballot initiative to continue those, but right now we don't have anything definitive or concrete on that. But also there's perhaps some idea, because the state's economy has been growing significantly. The more recent numbers from the Department of Finance and the State Controller's Office is that in the current year, that revenues are about $2 billion more at this point in time of year than the governor's budget or projection. So the state is mulling that over and how they're going to address this, but ultimately, hopefully at the end of the day, we don't have a reduction system-wide or to us here at City College. Expenditure assumptions, meeting contractual obligations, hiring chill, number 17. So this was Karen's second question. Is hiring chill, current funded vacancies will remain vacant through fall 15 term. Any exception to this must be evaluated and approved by the Chancellor. Got a question in the academic senate on this. Really, what does this mean functionally? I don't interpret to mean anything different from our more recent process that we went through. For example, just focusing on faculty. With last, I guess it was last spring now, we went through a process of the Faculty Advisory Council, the positions that were 30 faculty positions that were funded, and went through a process to designate priority. They came through the process. The acronym or the name of the committee escapes me at the moment. FPAC, thank you. FPAC. I always want to say 18, but FPAC. And it came through for the Chancellor's review and approval, and they were approved. I don't imagine, and we have a chance in the room, but I don't imagine anything different from that going forward. Right now, more recently, perhaps because of the times or other things, we've had a lot of attrition. And I think we all understand that in some of our impacted programs, we need faculty. And so the Chancellor is cognizant of that. And in order for these programs to remain vibrant and grow, expand enrollment, increasing enrollment, we're going to need those positions. The same evaluation process for the classified positions as well. And we've done that classified priorities twice now. Fall of 13, there were 16 positions, and more recently there were 10 positions. Again, following a similar process. So I don't imagine anything different than that. I don't imagine necessarily stopping the established existing processes that we have in place, based upon planning, based upon priority, and based upon funding.
Ron, we're at 45 minutes. Any objections to extending another 10 minutes? Do you have any objections to extending?
Well, that was the last one I was going to speak to, unless I didn't answer all your
Are we
questions.
okay with 10 more minutes? Okay, very good. Okay.
So I saw the hand.
Yeah, okay. So about that, so how does that make it a chill? Is our standard practice now is that everything has to go through a process before it's approved, right? So how is this a building, are you saying that there's, maybe the Chancellor can help out with this one?
Sure.
Something different is happening other than the practices that have now been established where everything gets through and gets approved? I mean, for instance, in December, we saw a list of classified positions, a couple which were at the library that are desperately needed, which were approved. Are those now going to be re-examined, or are those, those are approved?
No. The process that we're using actually creates what I call a chill. And, a lot of places they have hiring freezes, which means they're not going to hire people. We are hiring people through a process that's tied to program review, and it creates actually a slowdown of what might have been different in the past, where people just automatically refilled the position. We're actually looking at those positions, at least that's what I'm being told, to discern whether or not that's the right position. Is it the right job description? And all of that slows down the hiring. And that actually creates a small window of opportunity for savings. But I think it's prudent that we slow ourselves down as we are looking at what are our real needs going forward. And if I can take a minute and talk about not this year, but the following year. Ron, I think that he'll be back to you to talk about the next $7.5 million shortfall that we're going to have. Take that and translate that into sections of classes. That's a real crisis. 450 classes per semester. That's a real crisis. And we have to start thinking about that today. I think we can get back some of the enrollment, but I don't know that we're going to get back 10% of our enrollment. And I'm not even sure we're going to be able to get back roughly 2,500 FTES is what we need. My best guess from looking at Ron's numbers. So those are the things that are concerning to me right now. And that's one reason why the process helps us.
So then looking at this item, right, I'm such a literal person, where it says exceptions to this must be evaluated and approved by the chancellor, why would there be exceptions to this if this is our standard practice?
You might have a vacant.
There is a possibility of just going
you
straight
might,
to you and skipping a process.
if there's a vacancy in a critical area, let me think, nursing, biology. Let's say we're down to where we've only got one faculty member and we need two in order to meet the external accreditation requirements for automotive or one of the other departments that has an external accreditation requirement, and if we don't meet it, we lose the program. Well, it wasn't on the list, okay? It wasn't on the prioritization list. Something happened to the person got another job or something. Then that department can go through Susan and come to me and say, hey, look, we got a crisis here. We don't have time to go through that process.
Actually, yeah, this used
So
to happen
that-
in the past, and all that happens is that you just have another meeting of FPAC and you do the process quickly.
Well, for faculty, it's, yeah, and
The
for
faculty has
staff
that.
too, I mean, there's emergencies.
So,
Yeah.
but that's what that really means. Because this is based on program review and a program review process.
Which is a more relaxed process. We have to do emergencies.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, please.
With all the hiring of classified staff, but we haven't seen any changes in centers, for example, about our classified staff. We have major needs. We are lacking like admission and enrollment. We have one classified staff, and we have been waiting, nothing happened. The program review, time budgeting and planning, building and ground, blah blah, but nothing has happened. So how do you explain that?
Okay, so the budget, there oftentimes there's a lag or a disconnect. Based upon the priorities, and based upon the process, the chancellor, for example, the 10 classified positions, we go in there and we put the budget in there to support those 10 positions. Then the department has to go through the hiring process. More often than not with our classified staff, it's going through the departments, the city and county civil service, which takes time. For example, the 16 initial positions that were prioritized, approved, and funded in fall of 13, out of that, approximately 6 of them were buildings and grounds. We're just getting all those 6 filled. It's taken perhaps a year. So, I think that's a great question. It's important to understand that just because we go through the process, it's approved by the chancellor, we put the funding behind it for salary and benefits. In a perfect utopian environment or world, those people would be there tomorrow. But unfortunately, because of the hiring process and required, some of the state requirements, EEO and whatnot, that there's a lag. Oftentimes there's a lag. And sometimes that lag can be as much as a year, dependent upon the type of position that we're trying to get. So, it's a great question. I think we would all love for those 10 positions and the previous 16 to be filled today. But they're funded, they're going through the process, and the process is the process, and we're tied to it. It takes a while.
Yeah, but why we don't look at the classified staff that already are hired across the district and balance it and make it fair across the district to serve students at all? That is the big dilemma for us as students.
That would be quite the undertaking in terms of, because you'd be taking from some programs and giving them to the others. and, you know, not to say that that couldn't be done, but generally that involves a lot of effort. You know, perhaps a lot of bloodletting.
I understand most program because, for example, admission and enrollment, it's major to receive students, to register them, and we know we have been working to improve student enrollment. But when you have one classified staff in one center, while you have 5 or 4 or 3 in other, doesn't make sense. If we have to look at districts as whole to serve students at all center, at same as also the same everywhere, to be fair to students.
I believe Michael wanted to comment.
The deans from the student services side and also the center side they've been meeting over the last couple of weeks. In our meeting just yesterday, we had the deans refer back to their program review to make sure that the classified positions were the same in both the centers and also the student services side. And then we're prioritizing those positions to see which centers get the first person or the second person. So at this point in time, what we are doing is matching the specific staff that's needed, specifically classified staff, so that they're matched in both the deans of the centers and the deans of the student services side. So when it comes before the different levels that it works up to get to the chancellor, we would be able to see that we're requesting the same staff for positions in the centers. And that was just a meeting that we just had yesterday. And we also did begin to have those conversations on the in-class Ocean campus side too. Okay.
Just a little quick information. So first of all, I wanted to thank, unfortunately Mary Lou is not here. They did send down some people to the downtown center. You missed the meeting. But to help out in the evening to open to 7 o'clock. And I need to just informally, we did some tally, and total extra hours, we were open there for 9 hours total. And during that time, 120 students either at classes or registered. So just how important those hours are.
Thank you.
So that concludes. The last thing I want to clarify, that going back to the SSSP, looking at the governor's budget itself, is that $200 million is split evenly language between student success and the student equity fund. So $100 million going to the SSSP and $100 million going to student equity. Just wanted to clarify that. So that included.
Thank you. Rosario, did you have a question?
No, I think it got
answered?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are at 55 minutes. Do we want to extend, or do we just have one more question? Or?
Just one question.
Okay.
My jaws dropped at one of them. It looks like the faculty STIRS is 10.73%, and it's going up. And then we have CEPRS, which is going up, but we don't know how much. And then CalPERS doesn't really apply to us too much. So why is CEPRS like twice as much as STIRS? I mean, it's a jaw dropper, and it's going up. And this, I think everybody should have their benefits. I'm just like.
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting observation because, to be honest with you, perhaps CEPRS knew something a few years ago that PERS and STIRS didn't take note of. Is that, CEPRS, I can touch that around. The CEPRS contributions for the current year are 23.26%. We think they're going to increase maybe by 0.25%, somewhere in that range. Not significantly, not that significantly statistically. But if you look at the long-term plan put forward by STIRS and the governor, that 10.73 next year, this year it's 8.888. Next year it's going to 10.83. Eventually, it's going to go to 21%. So really, one could say that CEPRS perhaps is better funded and has less of an unfunded liability than STIRS because CEPRS started taking that action a few years ago. But ultimately, right now, it is jaw-dropping. It is significant, to be honest with you, especially when I go to CBO conferences, and most of their folks are in PERS. and their PERS contribution is 10.71%. And I tell them, for our classified folks, we're contributing 23%. Their jaw drops like yours. You know, huh? How are you doing that? How could you afford that? Well, you know, it's painful, but you know, we do it. It's the right thing to do, and we have an obligation, an employer obligation to fund it. But it's a cost that we bear that a lot of our colleagues around the state don't have that. Now they will eventually as PERS and STIRS ratchets up. But you know, we've been paying that higher percentage for quite some time now.
And it's not only we, but it's the employees themselves who also.
See, personally want to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very informative. Okay, very good.
All
Before
of
we get
us are
into
like-
public comment, I believe the Chancellor had wanted to make a few comments. Chancellor John.
Thanks. I'll try to be brief. First, I want to come and say thank you to everybody who has helped us with a real challenge in terms of the Civic Center, campus, and in terms of what we're going to have to do with Gulf Street. There was a monumental effort to ensure that students were served, and I appreciate that, and again, I want to say thank you. The second thing I wanted to do was announce that we are working on developing a new brand. And we're coming up actually next week. It becomes the official birth date of the college. We'll be 80 years old, at least on paper, on the 15th of February. And we're working to develop a number of different events that will celebrate the history of this institution, the renaissance of what we do, bigger and better, as we move into the next 80 years of our existence. One of the things, well, just as an aside in terms of significant dates, we were etched into being on the 15th. We actually made a pronouncement at the War Memorial Opera House on the 26th of August and held our first classes on September 4th. All of those are big dates, and we're starting to put together some ideas about how we might celebrate, and so we'll be coming back to this group and to others to look for folks to help us find ways to celebrate the wonderful, if not grand, opportunity that we have to demonstrate to the city and to the Bay Area what this college means. That's tied to our marketing, and so we'll be putting out a survey to see what people think in terms of branding. I saw a mascot that looks like our Ram, sort of like a sports mascot. That will help us, again, let people know that we're here, we're still strong, and we're open for business. Thanks to a lot of folks' help, we're actually going to participate in the upcoming Lunar Parade. And so there are a lot of things on the drawing board, and I just want to solicit your help in making those things really grand events, really opportunities for us to reach out to the community and tell them we're here and come back. Because the enrollment issue is really a finite issue in that people just stayed away. They didn't go anywhere. We've got pretty good data that tells us they didn't go to the other districts. So it's now an opportunity to use the 80th anniversary to help us with that branding of the district, to remind people of how great this institution is and what we do in terms of helping people become all that they want to be. Thank you again for those who helped and supported us. There's still a lot of work to be done, and we're going to continue that effort. But I know that we can, with
successful. It's gonna take us a while to rebuild Civic Center. But I know it will be done, and it will be better than it was. Thank you.
Next, we'll go into public comment. Is there any public comment? Yes, ma'am.
So I actually had a few public comments, but I'll take turns with everyone else who has other things that they would like to say. One was that there was a notification before about kind of the diversity committee and some of the report outs, and I wanted to just kind of put forth that we're really interested in seeing that happen. That the diversity committee comes to this committee as a standing committee and kind of reports out on what it's doing and kind of what it does and what it's working on.
You can do that. That's a good suggestion. You can go ahead and ask all your questions.
Bring it back tomorrow.
Did you say you had more?
Can I answer one, because I kind of repeated it.
Yeah, good. I'll take turns.
Okay, sure, no worries. Yes,
Just real quick, I mean, I think that it would be really great to also do that for the enrollment management committee, because, a question came up about, I mean, the chairs already submitted their,
Were you connected to the
fall
cable?
schedule, and they didn't do it based on any kind of enrollment management plan, and so I just kind of wonder, what is happening with that committee? I actually texted Carol Maher, who's on it, and she basically says that, that she's been asking for some data so that they can make some plans and we've been getting that, so I think it'd be good to know what's going on there.
Okay, I've got that one on my list too. Thank you, Lisa.
So my other thing was to make a suggestion that we kind of start the process of perhaps formally kind of mapping how this group relates to other groups. We had talked about that before, how do resolutions kind of come back to this committee and go hit the student side, what they need to do. And I was hoping to see this committee kind of take up that type of governance issue. I've in my roundabouts at the college, I've heard, this plan is going over here, this plan is going over here, and there are a lot of plans that I actually think that this governance body should be actually looking at and thinking about how those plans become actionized. And so I wanted to put forth that I would hope maybe to start that process, and probably we're going to talk about that for a bit.
Do we want to maybe set up a little task force or group that can start creating that flow chart? Maybe they can come, from this group and then they can come back? Or do we want to do it as all of us together? All of us together?
I was hoping that we could rely on Jim Grivich's policy skills. I don't know what role the planning committee plays in this, about, perhaps thinking, because a lot of that planning is also actionizing. I don't know if actionizing is a word.
What?
Something like that.
Yeah.
Make it so.
If I could, I'd echo that. I mean, there's an existing participatory governance policy. I think it's 2.31 that with the capital projects committee and to be honest with you, I have a biased interest in folding ITAC up under the umbrella of our structure and those committees having report outs to the PGC as the umbrella committee. I would echo. I'd like to echo that in terms of Grivich's gift of gab in terms of writing policies and procedures and whatnot. We need to revise that one in particular because the Capital Projects Committee and include the purpose and the purpose statement and that committee's role and reporting relationships to this committee in it, and so it seems to be an opportune moment.
So, Jim, can you put, as Ron put it, your gift of gag?
That isn't the word I would choose, but that's okay.
Can you put it together and maybe next meeting we can?
Yeah, it basically just be a basic chart, not a lot of words. That's why the app didn't quite fit, but a chart that would more or less set up a structure to bring all these things together. I think that's essentially what you were after.
Yeah, we have that for the next
starting point.
Yeah.
Can we have that for the next session?
Yeah, 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, very good. We're still in public comment. Let me see if it's.
I was good. That was all of my stuff that I
No A paper agenda? You're very welcome. We've gone over 5 minutes. Yes?
I have like just kind of 2 comment questions, and just in the name of transparency, I feel that it's not this committee's, place to make this announcement, but I feel that it would have been nice if the college had been publicly notified about what's going on with the special trustee, that we heard it via the newspaper, and Lillian made a little announcement, but we haven't heard anything from the college itself as to what is going on, even if you don't know particularly, just an announcement about that. And also about Goff Street, what is being done for Goff Street, what's happening with payroll, where's it gonna go, what are you exploring? We would like to know what's going on.
Steve, did you want to address the special trustee piece?
Well, I think what's been in the news is what the story is. I think the point was that there was desire for something official coming out of the college. I don't think people are lacking information. The information is just that, Trustee Ugrella is leaving and a new one is coming. But I think that the request was that there be something public. Yeah.
Official.
Well, something
Right.
that we can trust. I mean, Bryce Harris's Twitter tweeted.
Yeah,
That's
we
how
found out that Bryce Harris's Twitter tweet on 1:30 Friday afternoon. That's how we found out. I would think that the administration could get ahead of Twitter just a little bit, like.
Or at least follow closely behind.
Well, I think we could get ahead.
It's a
We
good
knew
start.
Before the newspapers.
Just a brief announcement, I have no details, but a lot of people were, the whole weekend, on email lists and stuff was just rife with rumors and making things up, and, people already have enough to churn. They don't need something like that, which could be solved by a simple email going out, just saying more information coming when we have it, that this is happening, which could have come out at 1:30 on Friday, or at least maybe even earlier.
Thank you, Senator. James, were you next?
Teresa.
Teresa, James.
Just echoing the same common sentiment. When various people come up to me and say things like, it's interesting, this is the second year that I learn more from the newspaper about what's going on in the college than I do from any communications from our constituencies or our management. And it's frustrating. There are things like Almany, Goff, special trustee. It's just communication should not be that difficult on things that affect the entire campus.
Thank you, James. Teresa?
And I'm sorry to beat a dead horse, but I couldn't agree with you more on that. I think that as an employee at this college, for me to hear about new hires, new admin hires, relocation of students, anything of that import from somewhere other than my leadership doesn't, leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So, I just want to say that.
Thank you, Teresa. Attila, Bushra, and then I will get to you.
And a little bit to build on that. Also, there were some, beside the fact that, yes, we were asked and we didn't know anything because it was in the newspaper, but we didn't get any information. Also, the question that come up like, so if because in a center, could that person from the admission enrollment office come to the downtown center, which is a problem? We don't even know what happened with the classified employees that were at the civic center, because we are really short of people. For example, we don't have recycling. It's done by faculty and staff because we don't have anyone there. So that would have been a little bit nice if there would have been a little bit more input also. I don't know if Jesse was able to have an input about the distribution of the employees so I don't know how the process worked. It would have been probably useful for the district in decision making to get a little bit more feedback from some of us on the district, center levels.
Thank you. Bushra?
Well, I'm just going to make a comment on behalf of the students. distress about the closing, like short notice, without informing students, without informing us as a executive council, because we didn't even know about it. I mean, any decision, we already had it in our group that it had to come, anything regarding major, regarding the student, at least as executive council, we should have known about it. Also, I mean, I'm not gonna beat, as you say, that horse, but it was, I mean, shocking, very shocking to us, for our students, for the new students that are coming, try to enroll at Civic Center, to come last minute to, there is no class, the Civic Center is, it just, I mean, it's just unbelievable for us. We cannot make, I mean, we cannot absorb it. Our mind cannot, it's too shocking for us. And for those students, it's very disheartening, because the feeling, as a student, to feel, to be treated that way, that is not right, that is unfair, and not how any human being should be treated. So I would like that the administration to, in the future, to make sure that before taking any rush decision like that, to take in consideration the livelihood and our students. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you,
And
Bouchard.
I don't have, it's too emotional for me to even express what I want to say. So.
Thank you, Bushra. We're at about 15 minutes. Do we want to extend? I think we had one more question. Yes? Yes. Okay, 5 more minutes. Yes, sir.
It's difficult. I'm changing the subject, which I feel a little bit awkward about, because I think that's, thank you, Bushra, for your comments. But I just wanted to mention something that actually our academic senate president has recently written about in our SO coordinator, and I was a little bit surprised that wasn't on the agenda a little bit today. But we do have as I understand it, a crisis in terms of collecting SO data, meeting our accreditation standards coming up, in terms of making sure we have the data that we need to get a program review. We're really on a short timeline. So I just wanted to make sure that maybe the importance of that issue is emphasized maybe in the future and maybe discussed, and I am afraid that we might not make it. So that's my public comment.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, any other public comments?
She wrote a
Yes, Joyce.
I think I can see some missing communication.
Can hear.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I see a lot of miscommunication understood. So I think it is for us as board members, they can send a notice about what's going on, something like that. No, like they say they didn't know they're gonna close the center, and probably they can send us a note, right?
Okay. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on to unfinished business. I believe we added accreditation at 10 minutes, and Karen will do the report. Thank you, Karen.
So I'm really just going to read a few things to you, which I think is a really good start for this. One is from the decision letter. On page 3 of the decision letter, I'll paraphrase some of this. It says that the team report basically concurred with CCSF representatives that the college has the ability to come in compliance with all the accreditation standards during the restoration period, but noted concerns about whether CCSF will initiate changes promptly and then sustain and mature its practices as necessary to demonstrate that it meets the standards. And for those of us who were here in spring of 2013, we had the experience of, in July of 2012, we were told, here are these things that you must do, you know, you better get busy and do them. We got busy and did them, and in spring of 2013, we were told, well, yes, you're doing them now, but you haven't been doing them for a full year, and therefore you don't meet the standards, and we're going to terminate you. So this statement is a very serious statement about telling us that the things that we need to do to meet the standards, we can't do them a year from now. We need to do them right away, so that when we turn in our report, which is due, so that a year from now, when we're turning in the report saying, here's what we've done, we can say, we did this a year ago, and now we can show you how we evaluated and assessed and so forth. So that's sort of the little prelude to it. And then there's a whole section, of course, from the team report, and I'm sure President Paris, you've read it. I don't know if everybody on the PGC has, but there's a whole section in there about Standard 4, about 3 standards that we don't meet, and particularly that the PGC doesn't meet. And I'm just going to read the little chart part of that. So for A1, it's saying here's what we absolutely need to do, and we have done it already. For A1 is clarify structures and processes to ensure representative and consistent student participation on the Participatory Governance Council. Improve dissemination of information as well as processes to receive input and issues for consideration from constituency groups at the PGC in order to broaden participation in the college, in college governance. And demonstrate the routine evaluation of the PGC and its subcommittees. So we had a little discussion about this last fall, but then we didn't take any actions. For A3, continue to develop and employ assessment tools to assess the effectiveness of the PGC and its subcommittees in support of continuous improvement. Effectively communicate with leaders to participate in the PGC and how it interfaces with legal governance systems. That touches on what you said. And for A5, evaluate all components of the governance structure and processes and provide continuous legal evaluation. So we're now into February. Our governance responsibilities are not just talking about how the PGC functions, but that the PGC is functioning well enough to deal with these other issues that are college-wide and that are part of college governance.
Any comments or questions for Karen? Yes, Lillian.
Can I ask about, and I realize it's 5:32, but a long time ago, earlier this afternoon, there was a conversation about were we going to, basically, did you want an accreditation update? Gohar did ask me if she had to go to let you guys know what was happening on the accreditation steering committee. I didn't know if that was part of the plan when this got added back to our agenda.
Usually, well, from the meetings I have attended and have began with, we usually do have an accreditation report. I know she's on there for the next meeting, the
March 19th.
So I know it's on there for that. And she said that she would have been happy to make some comments, but she said to have them with her.
Right, she texted me and asked me if I would do so for her.
Sure.
But I didn't know if that was.
If you would like to make some comments, that's fine.
Okay. So the accreditation steering committee, which meets on Tuesday, every other Tuesday, and will meet again this Tuesday, and you guys are all welcome to be there. We would love to have it be so well attended and have everyone so interested that we have to move out of Club 39. But what we're doing is we're creating an action list, so very much like what Karen had just referred to. And the timeline, so I'm going to start with the timeline because the timeline is the basis for a lot of the concerns that have come up here. So the timeline right now is that September 2015 is used to gather data. And it's not the only semester that's used to gather data, but it's the key semester for gathering data, because in fall of 2015, we have to use that data to write program review. And if you read through the accreditation standards holistically, beyond just like looking at standard 4A for PGC, but if you read through holistically, or even just to whet your appetite, just go there and put in program review and find all the times program review is mentioned in the standards, and then upload the manual for institutional self-evaluation and do the same thing, and you will see that fall's program review is asking for some departments a lot more than what we've usually done. And so we need data to go in these higher quality, more evaluative program reviews in fall 2015. And at the same time, in fall 2015, we need to start making what I'm calling a deep outline, what GoHar would like to have as already writing our next self-evaluation that gets written from fall to spring, and then starts going out to constituent groups because it's due October 15th of 2016 for another site visit. And so, kind of piggybacking off of Hal's concerns, what that kind of means to us is that we all need to kind of stop and read what we have to do with an eye towards what do we have to do differently in order to put in place right now the small process changes, and it's a lot of process changes, but they're not necessarily huge. Not every committee needs to write like how it works, like PGC. Other committees have been much more long-standing. They need to change just a few things in order to create the processes that create the data so that we can write that report and have data. There were places in the visiting team report where they actually said there's no evidence to back this statement up. And that happened multiple times in the visiting team's response. There is no evidence to support the statements that you're making. And so it's not enough to write the next report. We have to back up and change what we're doing so that we can write the next report in a way that meets these standards. And so I would share, I mean, I have a lot of other things to say because I've been looking at the standards, but I think that this body right here, I mean, this is supposed to be the governance body of the college, right? Should have, you know, break out the accreditation standards. Everybody read a standard, come back, report, create some action items, right? What are you going to do in classified? Come back and tell us. What are we doing in the academic senate? I'm happy to tell you everything that we're doing. We need students everywhere. We need students everywhere because your voice is so incredibly important. And so, you know, I guess admin, we've pretty much told you what we want you to do.
Every day.
I don't want to leave you out.
Every day.
We are at 10 minutes.
We don't feel left out.
We want to extend,
Let's
or
extend for 5 minutes, and then we're done.
any objections? Okay.
Well, and I would like to ask our administration and all our constituent groups to take a very deep breath and stop the drama. And this includes closing things without advance notice, having umbrella leave and having no notice, because all of that distracts from this urgent business of doing our accreditation. We really have to pull together, and it is tiresome to constantly, it seems like every day. In fact, there's some people on the Senate that are thinking of wearing those red plastic fireman hats because it's a fiery day. And I think we all need to commit, everybody needs to commit to stopping that and focusing on what's more important. And I don't have an answer for it, but I can say that it really is like a fire a day, or 3 fires a day. And we are all contributing to it. Everybody here, our leadership, everybody's contributing to it. So what can we each do to cut that out and focus on what is really important, which is our self-study and preparing for it. And so it's just a request of it. And share it with your friends.
Okay, y'all, no more drama. Done with the drama. Cut it out. Steve?
Just want to make a brief comment on the accreditation. I'm pleased with the urgency that I'm hearing. We had a conversation amongst some of our administrators the other day about this and the steps that need to be taken. And there was some concern raised that, well, we just finished the work in the fall, so we need to, kind of take a breath and not relax, but it seems like we just finished. But I think the comments that are made go to the point that it doesn't matter if we just finished. There's an urgency now, and we need to get with the program. So I think that's a good.
And the requirements have increased. Does everybody know?
Yeah,
the new standards make the old ones look relaxed.
Yeah, it's a good message, and I think it's one that we can all rally around.
What does that look like?
What does what look like?
Rally around this new message, right? Like, okay, so here we are, it's PGC, we said we only wanted to extend a little bit, and we've said this, and then what happens, right? What happens? We've said it, we've said no drama, we've said look at it, so what does it look like to rally?
I don't have the answer to that
Okay, we
question.
got Michael and Michael.
Oh, that's a good question. What does it mean? I know from a student services perspective, I've asked every department for every meeting that we have accreditation, SLOs on the committee, and we're reporting back what the work that we've done. Meaning, there can't be a meeting that happens unless we have accreditation and we have SLOs and all the different areas that, especially in student services, that we're being held accountable for it in that area. And that's what it really means. It's not just administration, it's just not this committee, but it has to be in everything that we possibly do at this institution. And you're exactly, and I guess I can speak to this, you're exactly right, no more drama. Because every time we have drama at this institution, that's another 10 students that walk out this door. And we got 30,000 students to get back here, and that's my agenda.
Thank you. Ron, did you
Well,
want to
I
add
was just
something?
I'm so actually heartened and pleased to hear this conversation.
Mhm.
And, as a committee, although I'm not a member, but I kind of feel like part of the family because I'm here now, is that, in being in other environments where we were going through some accreditation hurdles, I have found that, really the committee's actions reinforce these types of statements. And so perhaps I would suggest, kind of going to Francine's comments, is that, by those actions and by those statements and actions behind them, perhaps, put out there that, the PGC is sponsoring or hosting a 2014 accreditation standards update, so everybody knows about it, and put it out there. I mean, it's things like that that put the emphasis and reinforce the statements you're making right now, because right now without it, they're just statements.
Thank you. We are at 15 minutes. Do we want to extend?
No.
No?
I just agree completely with Reinhard. That's a great idea, actually.
And maybe it's the number one thing on our agenda every time we meet. Instead of having it later,
I've already put it on
there's
there.
more people at the beginning of the meeting.
It's one of my long notes. Yeah, we're good.
I know that Gohar had said, can I be on there? And I can't remember exactly how often, but I think it's, I think just every meeting.
every
it's
meeting,
every
every
meeting.
day.
It has to be a standing report and.
It can't just be a report. It can't
Yeah.
just
It has to be a discussion.
It has to be, and now what are we going to do next?
Yeah, okay. So it'll be a standing, what now we're gonna do next, so our accreditation.
And if we have stumbled and created drama to the leadership or the fellowship or whoever, why don't we just spend that time going, okay, whoops, we stumbled, what are we gonna do about it today? And so we can focus, because we're all human and we do stupid things. But I think, what happens is that instead of dealing with it, we go yammering all over the place, and by the time we recover from it, we haven't done a thing, because we can't spell the word standard after that. And we need to really focus.
Any other comments or?
Can I recommend something? Since we're, and just really quick, one of the things that the Academic Senate is asking all of its committees to do is we sent an email to all of the chairs that says, please read the standards, please think about how this changes what you're doing. So please update your committee description to the new standards. Please think about all the things that you need to do, including posting minutes, making decisions based on data. I'm happy to forward this to you, Virginia, because I'm about to ask you to do the same for the PGC committees, right? To actually put it out there and have them report back. We read the standards. Here's how the standards ask us to make different things, and here's what we're going to do right now this semester, so that when we write the report in the fall, we have minutes posted that demonstrate that we make data-informed decisions in our meeting. So we're asking our academic senate committees to do it, and it might be nice if the PGC also asked its committees to do the same thing. And report back out. I will send it to you.
I'll gladly spend more time, or we can keep moving forward. Yes, moving forward? No?
Are we extending the meeting, or because we have all of these BPs and APs and we can.
Well, we
you take
started
them on
at about
consent?
1:45, so we're at 2 hours now.
I just started like
So Karen's gotta go.
Yeah, I think we may have.
Can we
None of them are critical. We were hoping to get some of them on the Board of Trustees agenda for February. And I suppose we can still do that. We're meeting again in 2 weeks.
Do we want to do 5 minutes, or do we just want to?
Next time.
I think we wanted.
Okay.
Yeah.
So am I hearing a motion to adjourn the meeting?
We're hearing a motion to adjourn the meeting and put everything still on the agenda on the next one.
Okay, so everything from district facilities, plus all the other stuff we talked about today, next agenda.
I would second the starting on time.
Starting on time? Bring some in.
Can this be a public?
We actually can. Do we want
We
to?
started at 3:30 instead
I
of
think
3
that's a great
o'clock
idea.
because we never meet at 3 o'clock.
Let's do a little list and we'll do a potluck. Our next meeting, is everybody okay with a potluck? Yes. Okay, potluck meeting. Thank you. Everybody have a good night.
Do you want me to send you an email?
Yeah.
We left the auditing one off.